Hi, my name's Anna Fogel, a dietitian over at Harborview. I work in an outpatient setting, so I work directly with patients. But my background is I went to culinary school and I worked as a chef for many years throughout the greater Seattle area. So since it's summer, I was kind of thinking that something that we might want to focus on is all the abundance that we have in Washington. Washington is one of the largest agricultural producers in the country, and as a state, we make over 300 different crops. We're the largest producers of apples, of hops, obviously with our beer industry here. Spearmint is something I think is very interesting. We are the largest producer in the country of spearmint. And so since we have all these wonderful fresh ingredients, nothing like a dip to really kind of bring the summer together. But I think what I would like to start with is kind of the fundamentals of knife skills. So when you cut something, you kind of think, okay, I'm cutting this thing, I'm just going to eat it, and then it'll be fine. But the reality is the size and width of which you cut something, especially fresh vegetables and fruit, can make a huge difference in how you enjoy or perceive a dish because we not only eat with our taste buds, we eat with all of our senses, right? Our touch, our smell, our sight. And so it can make a huge difference in kind of the palatability of a dish, even though you're not really doing much to the ingredient besides cutting it. So before we talk about knife cuts, we want to talk about knife skills. So, for those of you that don't know, this is a knife. Um, this is my favorite knife. It is produced by Misono, which is a Japanese knife producer. And knives will differ based off of their country of origin and kind of what steel they use for the blade and also how the blade is forged, how heavy the handle is. And I think that there are certain parts of a knife that we should all know. So, this is the blade. The top of the blade is called the spine. And then we have the sharpened edge here. This little corner is the heel. And then we have what is called the tang, which is basically the unfinished steel. In some knives, it runs all the way through. So you can see in this knife, it runs all the way through the handle. And it usually has to do with, again, which country the knife is produced in, but then also how strong you want the knife to be. So most American knives, the tang does not run all the way through the handle. So then basically you have your handle, you have the butt of the handle, and then over the heel you have the grip, which is basically called the bolster. So the bolster is where the blade and the handle meet, and it is where you hold the knife. You think handle, right? I hold it on the handle, I hold it like this. That's incorrect. You want to have control over your knife, and the best way to do that is to practice safe handling. So we have our bolster here, we have our heel here. We want to hold the knife between our forefinger and our thumb lightly, and we want to hold it right in front of the bolster. Now, some knives, like for example, Swedish knives don't usually have a bolster. A lot of Japanese knives will not have a bolster, so you don't see this like blunt edge between the blade and the handle. But most American knives do. So you want to hold the knife basically on the bolster with your forefinger and thumb around the blade. Now, a lot of people hold their knives and they put their forefinger on the top. That doesn't give you much control. If you're trying to cut, you're only controlling it from one side and it's not very balanced. When you hold it like this, you basically are allowing to have a lot more control over the blade. So we've got our finger positions, then the rest of our fingers will lightly go around the handle. Um, sorry, Sebastian's coming back. So we want to hold lightly. You're not squeezing juice out of a lemon. You want to be really light with how you handle the knife. So we've got our forefinger, our thumb, and our fingers lightly wrapped around the handle of the knife. So that being said, what do we do with our other hand? Well, that's our stabilizing hand. So We do not want to cut like this, because if we put our hand out and we have our fingers out, our chances of cutting ourselves go up. We do what's the claw, what I call the claw. Basically, make your hand into a claw. You want to round your fingers so that the edge of your knuckle will then hit the blade, and use it as a guide. And you just move that hand to guide the cutting hand. So yeah, so that's like knife handling 101. Hold the knife correctly first. You're not on the bear. We're not like trying to, do things fast. Take your time, learn how you feel best holding a knife, but always use that forefinger and thumb as your guide, as the primary like focus. And then that's where you would differ with where you get your knives from. I like the Japanese knives because I have long hands and they have longer handles. I have very long fingers. Uh, there are a lot of American brands that are really good for first-time knife owners. Wustog, Mercer are affordable brands. Premier is another really affordable brand. And it just really depends on, again, right? It's trial and error, what fits best in your hand. You don't want to use a knife that doesn't feel good. So the next thing is, well, let's sharpen our knives. This is not a sharpening tool. This is what is called a honing steel. This straightens the blade of your knife, which in turn makes it better at cutting. It doesn't make it sharper. Sharpening your knife takes using a stone. I don't pretend to be a knife smith. I don't sharpen my knives because I would probably mess them up pretty badly. So I actually take my knives to go get sharpened by a friend who knows how to use a sharpening steel or a sharpening stone. But everyone should use a honing steel, because you do want to try to straighten your knife out every time you use it. It just makes it easier to use. So you want to do about a 40-degree angle. And basically, all you're doing is a light stroke that way. There's a little safety here so that you're not going to cut yourself, but it's a stroke on each side of the blade, not hard. And really, again, thinking about it, we're just straightening it, right? So I'm not pressing down very hard. I use my finger as a guide as to the angle in which I want to hone my knife. And then that'll straighten. So those are knife skills. There are many different knives. I have some here. This is a paring knife. This is like a fillet knife. So it really depends, again, right? It's trial and error. Knives are very expensive. So typically I would say you go with like a Wustog. That's like a very affordable knife. And then you can kind of like take it from there and go ham. So now we're going to cut things, which there are a lot of different ways to cut things, but I think that there are some interesting and kind of like safe ways of looking at knife cuts. So in culinary school, we learn everything in the French methodology, which is all based around this French man named Escoffier, who created what we call the modern day brigade system in kitchens. So basically, he is like the godfather of modern French cuisine. But we're not in France, so I don't really think we necessarily need to keep up with these very kind of, in a way, archaic ideas of the culinary world, but also there are some easier tips and tricks from many other countries in the world that I actually find to be more effective. So we got a carrot. I peeled it. You don't necessarily have to peel your vegetables. If we go into the nutrition part, most of the fiber in vegetables are in their edible skins. So eating the skin is always a good thing. I just peeled it because that's what I wanted to do. So the first cut that I want to show is called a julienne or a bâtonnet. So julienne is a long, thin strip, and a bâtonnet is basically the same thing, just a little bit thicker. So we think natural cut French fry versus like the grated carrots you get for a potato salad. So the way that I'm going to show you how to do this is based off of more of an Asian influence when it comes to knife skills. French would cut this into a square, take a lot of the vegetable itself off, and there would be a lot of waste, which I don't really like because who's wasting vegetables in this economy? So what you do is you cut your vegetable on a very heavy bias. And then if we're doing like a thicker one, and you see I'm using my hands like that, this guy's rolling around a little bit, right? I'm not really into that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take a little bit of it off to make a flat surface, and then it won't roll around. So we got a heavy bias here. Now what I'm gonna do is take it maybe about 1/4 of an inch thick and just keep going with that bias, right? Keep using that claw as my guiding tool. And you can see my hand is clawed out. And we've got some like thicker strips here. So the way that you would want to do like what is called a bâtonnet, which is like a larger matchstick, is you essentially just, if you want to make it pretty, take the top off the bottom and the top, and then you just go like this. You cut it into sticks. They're not perfect, but you got a stick. There it is. If you made it a little bit bigger, you could use this to dip things in. And it really, again, right? It's not a race. What you're trying to do is you're trying to be comfortable with these very basic skills in order to then be able to be faster if you would like. So this is our bâtonnet. Now, say I want to dice this up for, I don't know, soup, stew, something like that. I would just move those matchsticks to the side and cut across them. And you have what we call a small to medium dice. There are different stages of dices. Brunoise is the smallest. It's about 1/8 of an inch, all the way up to a large dice, which is about 1/2 an inch. So these are great cuts for soups, for stews, or those sorts of things where you're kind of like, you know, you want something that's kind of uniform. When you cut things in a uniform way, they will cook at the same rate. So that is something to think about, right? If you're cutting large chunks of potatoes and tiny carrots, the carrots are going to obviously cook first. So that is our medium and large dice. Okay, so now we're going to go for the julienne. The julienne is a little bit different. So basically, and I'm going to take another carrot because I have 3, so I can do that. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the bias cut, but we're going to cut it very thin. So we do our heavy bias cut on the initial cut of the carrot. Again, right? Not digging this rolling around. I'm not cooking for Emeril Lagasse over here. So I'm basically, a little bit of imperfection is fine. And then we do much thinner, almost like shingles. So the same kind of bias cut, but much, much thinner. You can see they're kind of like very thin medallions. And that is going to be the base for our julienne. So, what you can do is kind of what I did before. You can cut the tops off if you want to make them completely perfectly square. I don't really think we need to do that. But what you do want to do is you want to shingle them, and then you want to cut against them. So if you do a thin cut over the shingled thin bias cut, you then get a beautiful little matchstick like that, and this is called a julienne. So these are really good for salads. These are really good for, basically like pickling and that sort of thing, because it's very thin. And then again, right, if you really wanted some like tiny, tiny little like diced up carrots in something, you would just take these julienne strips and you would just cut them against the strip. And then this is basically what we would call a brunoise, a very, very small, tiny dice. So those are kind of the basic cuts when it comes to any sort of salads or anything fresh. Because again, right, this is going to feel much different in your mouth compared to this. So it's really important to remember that in this case, size matters. So we've got those cuts. So what I'm going to do now is I want to show one cut that I think it's a traditional French cut, but I think it's really good. It's an easy cut to learn. Also, you usually want to put something under your cutting board to stabilize it, but I didn't do that, so that's on me. But so this cut is called an oblique cut. And basically, it's really, really good for like roasted vegetables, and it's a very easy cut, but it looks really pretty. So we've already got our bias cut here. I'm going to turn it to the other side so that it's kind of the bias is going the opposite direction. And then I'm going to cut in the opposite way. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a little medallion. That one's a little off because we had a heavy bias. But so what I'll do is when you cut, it'll be like this. You just do a half turn, so 180-degree turn, and then you cut again. And then you keep doing that. You turn the carrot 180 degrees, cut on a bias. And remember, use your fingers as a guide. Again, right? Another turn. And you've got these little guys. They're called oblique cuts. They're wonderful for roasting. They look really pretty. And they're very easy. The trick is really just a half turn. Every time you cut on a bias, not a heavy bias, and then you turn, you do a half turn. So those are knife cuts. There's a couple of other knife cuts that I think are very important as well. One is cutting an onion, so mincing an onion. I think that this is something that people kind of, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I'm not gonna like yuck someone's yum when it comes to how they cut things, but sometimes when you're watching someone cut something and you just are really scared, like you don't want to be scared for them. So it's good to have this skill. So we have our onion. Onions grow, they're alliums. They grow in the ground. They grow in concentric circles around a root base. So usually people will peel their onion first and all this stuff. I don't really see the point of that. I usually cut my onion first, especially because if I'm going to only use part of it, I would still have the skin and then I can wrap it and keep it for later. So it kind of stays a little fresher, a little easier. And you can see I'm trying to find a angle in which the onion will kind of be stabilized. So typically I don't advocate for putting your hand over your knife, but in this case, that's just kind of what we got to do. So we cut it in half, and you can see that we've got our root butt and we've got all of our rings. So typically what people will do is they'll cut the root butt off and then they'll like start cutting and then it's just chopping and stuff like that. I actually want you to leave the root butt on because it'll give a base so that your onion is not actually going to be moving around as much, so it's a little safer. So I cut off the top and then I peel off the outer skin because it's not edible. I mean, you could eat it, but I don't know how good that would be. And then you have your peeled onion with the butt attached to it. So now we've got a wonderful, great flat surface to work off of. What we want to do is start kind of diagonally and go around the onion to make long lines without going all the way through. So, and you can see I always try to rock my knife. I don't want to, be like hacking at it because if I'm kind of going willy-nilly, it's going to like the chances of me cutting myself kind of go up. But you can see it kind of keeps everything together. Well, kind of. But it makes it a little bit easier to get those kind of straight lines. So basically we're about halfway through. So I'm just going to cut it there. Now we've got it all kind of still together. It's almost like bloom and onion situation. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the julienne and the bâtonnet, is we're just going to cut against the grain. And you can see it's a little bit harder. Sometimes it can be easier to use smaller pieces of your onion. This is a pretty big guy. But you come out with everything kind of being uniform and perfect. And so you can adjust the size of this similarly to how you adjusted the size of the carrots, where you just like cut the strips either thicker or thinner. So that is kind of knife skills 101 when it comes to really just basic cuts. So got that. The next thing is going to be mincing something. So garlic is also an allium, so it's in the same family as onions. And basically, well, knives are going all over the place. So basically, what we want to do is, let's see. So, Here we go. So this is a clove of garlic. This is a head of garlic. Well, partial head of garlic. The clove is in the head. So if somebody says use a clove, you're only using one of these guys, not the whole thing. And again, right, similarly to an onion, they grow in concentric circles all in one singular space. So move these guys. So the best way I've found to mince garlic is really just to use the spine of your knife and kind of use the back of your hand to hit it in order to take the outer skin off. You want to use fresh garlic. I'm not gonna yuck someone's yum when it comes to garlic, but when you cut garlic, you kind of release all of these wonderful enzymes that then will help to kind of keep the garlic really flavorful. And so I would say cut your garlic fresh if you can. So we've got our garlic, and the trick is to take it the long way. Again, right? You might want a little bit of a flat surface, so we cut off a little bit of it. And then we just cut it into thin strips, kind of similarly to what we did with the carrot. You always want to try to have a flat surface, and you always want to try to minimize any movement that is occurring. So that being said, we have our thin strips, and then we're going to take our thin strips and we're going to do the kind of similarly to what we did with the julienne, which is to basically turn them into a julienne. Thin strips, as thin as you can. And so basically we have long, thin strips of garlic. So that's our garlic there. So we've got our thin strips. We're going to turn, and then we're going to mince. And again, right, this isn't a race. I'm not trying to cook for 50 people in like an hour. So that's that. You then have minced garlic. And the trick is, if you want it really minced, put your hand on the spine of the knife and kind of go over just haphazardly and pull and then go over it again. This will help to kind of move around the larger pieces so that you're able to get them a lot smaller. So that is that. Okay, so we've got our minced garlic. We did some knife cuts. What is the next thing that we want to do? Well, I think the next thing we want to do is we want to maybe do some herbs. And I'm going to rinse this off really quickly just because garlic is very sticky. So it has a lot of essential oils. So all right. Always hold a knife away from you when you walk with it, because if it drops towards you, then it's not falling, then the blade is not falling on you. One way to stabilize I'm like throwing stuff all over. One way to stabilize a cutting board is to just put a damp paper towel underneath it. You can see it doesn't move. So that kind of helps a little bit. So we are going to do something that is called a chiffonade. So we've got our herbs here, right? It's herb season. Herbs are blowing up. This is mint. And any large leafy herbs, you can do this knife cut with. And basically, essentially what it's doing is creating thin strips that you can kind of ribbon through sauces and soups and dips and those sorts of things. So what you do is you pile everything up into a nice little bundle, you roll it into a little burrito, and you cut. And this is where the sharpness of your knife becomes very important, because if you cut herbs with a dull knife, your chances of squishing them and bruising them and making them kind of not that pleasant go up. But if you use a very sharp blade, you then have less of a risk of doing that. So we've got our beautiful ribbons or chiffonaded mint. So that's great for, especially for dips. So what time is it? Really? Oh, Whoa, okay, I better start making some dips then, huh? Okay, so um, there's one more thing I want to show you. So picking herbs. This is parsley. It's everywhere. We all love it. So a lot of people, when you pick, you want to pick the leaves off of herbs because they're more flavorful, they're more tender, and they're not as fibrous as the stems. Um, but it can be kind of a pain. The act of picking leaves off of an herb is called garbling, which I think is like a really fun culinary term. Um, this is a little restaurant tip. When you have a big bunch like this, depending on how much you're using, what you can do is kind of grab the top. So bunch it, grab the top, and twist. And what that does is it kind of leaves you with mainly just the leaves and not much of the stem. It's a good way to, if you're trying to, if you need a lot of herbs at once, but you don't want to like be garbling all day. So that is that. So now let's make some dips. So we're gonna do two dips. I'm going to do a green goddess, and I'm also going to do a cucumber raita. So raita is like a very common dish in India and the Middle East, and it's a cooling dish. It's usually eaten as like a side dish with curries and those sorts of things, but I think it makes a really good dip. So for the base of both of these dips, I wanted to use similar ingredients to show that you can really kind of jazz something up without needing like a lot of ingredients. So the base of both is going to be Greek yogurt because we love Greek yogurt. This one is non-fat Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is a fantastic source of protein. It has double the amount of protein per serving compared to regular yogurt. So definitely worth it if you're trying to get those gains. But so both of the recipes are going to use Greek yogurt as the base. So this is a cucumber. What I'm going to do with this cucumber is I'm going to peel it and then I am going to de-seed it. And the reason is when you make dips, the biggest culprit to a dip is how much liquid are in the ingredients that you're adding to it. So something that can really make or break the texture is if the ingredient that you're adding has a lot of liquid in it. Cucumbers are primarily water. They're a wonderful hydrating, well, technically they're a fruit, but they're a wonderful hydrating vegetable to have during the summer because of their high water content. But not great if you're trying to make a really thick, luscious dip. So I might actually have you help me with this. Okay, so we've got our cucumber. I peeled it. I'm going to cut off the ends. And then the easiest way to deal with a long fruit or vegetable is to cut it into smaller, more digestible pieces. So I'm going to put all of this in a bowl because they're all going in the same place. Oh, yeah. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So cutting it into smaller, easier to manage pieces. This was honestly one of the best tips that my culinary school professor or chef gave me. And it seems so intuitive, but it really doesn't because most people are trying to cut a giant cucumber. But if you cut it into smaller bits, you can then, move it around a lot easier. So inside of the cucumber are seeds. And the seeds are primarily water. They are non-digestible. They have no flavor. So I'm going to take a spoon and I'm just going to take the seeds out. So I'm just left with the flesh. Similarly to cucumbers is tomatoes. So tomato seeds are also non-digestible. Sometimes they can be a little bit hard on the gut. So, it's really up to you. Because they're non-digestible, sometimes it can be really tough in the sense that it can cause some gas and, everybody's trying to be chill. So we don't want gas all the time, but it does show that our gut is working. So just take the seeds out because they're really not going to add anything to our dip. And similarly, when you make salsas, those sorts of things, and you use tomatoes or tomatillos that also have seeds that are very high in water, a lot of times individuals will take the seeds out just to then be able to not have it be so watery. Because that's truly the trick of a dip is how much liquid am I adding to it? What thickness do I want it? And really, like, how flavorful do I want it to be? So that being said, now I am going to grate it because we kind of want it dispersed throughout our dip. Oh, well, that's gone now. So this is a box grater. It has multiple different settings. It's really old. Don't judge me. I've had this box grater for about 15 years, but it works. Buy yourself a good box grater. If you buy a good quality one, it'll last you for a very long time. I'm gonna use the largest setting, and basically, we're just gonna grate the whole thing. We're gonna grate it, and as I grate it, you can see that, oh my gosh, there's so much water in this. So what I'm gonna have Sebastian do for me is to go to the sink and squeeze out some of the water. So yeah, so that's the easiest way to do it. What would be ideal would be to use something like a paper towel, or cheesecloth is a little bit more robust. We've also got even just like a hand towel, like a dish towel that you have in your kitchen. That works really, really well. And you can just squeeze all the water out. Similarly, with other things that you grate, tomatoes and those sorts of things, you can also squeeze the liquid out as well. But it's really up to you. In this case, we want to have our thick, creamy yogurt, so we really don't want really watery cucumber. Yeah, so what you'll do is like basically just take a couple of layered paper towels and just try to squeeze as much of the water out as you can, okay? Okay, great. All right, so got our grated cucumber, and you can see even if I just squeeze it now, there's water that comes out. So we don't want that. So Sebastian's going to go do that, and that'll be good to go. So we have our cucumber grated. Raita is awesome. It is a very versatile dip, or side dish that you can really kind of add whatever you want to it, which is another reason why I really wanted to choose this recipe. You could add fruit, you could add other vegetables, pomegranate. You can, basically you've got all these different ways that you can spice it up. You can make it sweet, you could make it spicy. Today I'm going to err a little bit more on the spicy side, just because I think that it'll be very delicious. But so we've got our cucumber. She's de-seeded. She is grated. She is dry. And then the recipe that we sent out, you use salt to draw out the liquid. We don't really have time to do that, so we're just gonna wing it. That's the great thing about cooking. You kind of just want to wing it. So that being said, we have our yogurt as one of the ingredients. And basically, we're just going to kind of mix everything together. So about a cup of yogurt. And we're just going to go with our heart here. We're not going to use any measurements because we don't have measuring cups. So I'd say that's probably about a third of a cup. So about 3 big ones, maybe one more for good measure. So that is our yogurt. We've got our yogurt in there. We then want to add our ingredients, which include this. And we also are going to add something to brighten it up, which is going to always be something acidic, aka lemons. Citrus is a wonderful way to add flavor without adding any salt. It's not that, you don't necessarily need to watch your salt intake if you don't have hypertension or any sort of cardiovascular issues or renal issues. But that being said, a lot of the foods we eat already have sodium added to it. So kind of keeping an eye on how much salt we're adding to the meals that we create is always a good option. So we've got our cucumber, we've got our Greek yogurt. And you guys can tell I really memorized this recipe that I wrote. And so then we want to add our lemon juice, and we're going to add a couple of spices. So we don't have cilantro, so we're going to wing it. We got this guy. We're going to add some of this. I am going to squeeze in some lemon juice. I usually squeeze lemons like this because then you can catch the seeds with your fingers, and then you're not picking seeds out of out of your dip. But basically, you can see it actually works pretty well. You got all the seeds in your hand. So, I always add more. Lemon juice is like I like acidic stuff. So that's again, right? Personal preference, whatever you like. And we are adding liquid, right? That's why it's so important. The other ingredients, we want them to be really dry. So we've got our lemon juice. We are going to add something else. We're gonna like jazz it up a bit. This is sambal. It's an Indonesian garlic chili sauce. You've probably seen it at like pho places or like different like Indonesian or Vietnamese restaurants. It's really, really good. Sambal olek is kind of like a chili itself. And so this has like garlic in it, which is really good. So you're kind of doing double duty. And we're just gonna add a little bit of this guy in there. I like it spicy. Do you like spicy? Okay, great. So I'm gonna make it spicy. So I'll probably add about, I don't know, like a teaspoon. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we got our sambal. Then we want to add something that's gonna warm it up. This is gonna spice it up. We want to warm it up. So what I'm adding is something called garam masala. Garam masala is a spice blend that originates from like India and Pakistan, and it's a blend of a bunch of different kinds of herbs or spices. So for example, cinnamon, fenugreek, cloves, star anise, like very, very warm spices. And, it's a great thing to kind of like add in to kind of like just bring a little bit of depth without spice or citrus. And you can tell I'm being super professional about this, but I'm just gonna like, again, right? Tell me to, whenever my body tells me to stop, there we go. So we've got our garam masala all over the place. I'm gonna grab a paper towel real quick. We've got our sambal. Typically, we would also want to add in some pepper. We don't have pepper, so we're just gonna wing it. The garam masala probably has a little bit of ground pepper in there, so that should work pretty good. And then we're gonna measure. I always measure salt in my hand. And with dips, the trick is start small and add more. You can always add more, you can never take away. The only way to really balance something if it becomes too salty in a dip is to really add some citrus, so some sort of vinegar or something that's acidic, because it'll kind of break through that saltiness. So we've got all of our spices. We've got some like sambal in there. So now we're going to take some of our parsley to add that brightness and that herbiness that we're looking for. So you saw I did the pull off the top, and you can see there's barely any stems in here. So I'm, huh? The gargled, yeah, I gargled it. So it's such a weird word, right? So now we're just gonna cut. And again, it's not a race. We're just kind of doing it. It's really hard to chiffonade little parsley leaves. So we're just gonna do a rough chop. And we wanna remember, kind of move things around so that everything is kind of evenly distributed and be kind of the same size. I have to be very careful with my knives. My friend just sharpened them for me and they are sharp. So yeah, we're gonna add that to the dip. And again, right, you could add cilantro, you could add mint, you could add dill, you could add whatever flavor you want. And
would you leave the bowl next to the yogurt, like right in front of the camera?
This one?
Yeah, so like put the bowl over there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. TV magic. Yeah, so basically just kind of mixing it up. And again, right, this is where it comes into what consistency do I want it? Do I want it more dairy forward? Do I want it more creamy? Do I want it wetter? Do I want it drier? And then you can kind of adjust using the ingredients that are different, have different amounts of hydration in them. So I think that looks pretty good. I really just want to stick my finger in it, but I'm not at home, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to taste it and see if it needs anything. Actually, no, it doesn't. That's actually really good. So, woohoo! That is done. So the way to serve it, because remember, we with our eyes and dips, since they're historically kind of this easy thing to put together, you can always make them look really good. So Usually what I do is I like to top it with something. You always like, you can, that's where you can like clean the bowl up a little bit, make it a little presentable. Um, Kind of do a little swirl like that. And you can see all of your ingredients. You can see what's in there, which is really nice. And I thought it would be really fun to add this in there, which is chili oil. I am obsessed with chili oil. This one is a crunchy chili garlic sauce. So you can kind of top it with that. This one's extra spicy, so I'm not going to put too much, but you can kind of like drizzle it around and it'll like, it creates a nice pattern. It makes it look really delicious on top of also just adding a little bit of spice. So got the chili oil. And then if you want to get super extra, you do a little garble again, right? Take a few leaves and you just tear them up and spread them around and she's good to go. So that is raita. So first dip. Okay, how are we doing, Sebastian, with time? I don't.
15, 45.
Okay. Um. Okay, I think that we've got time for the dip, the last dip. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick rinse. There is that. Is there any questions maybe or anything while I'm rinsing this guy off? Okay, so you can tell this is my first time cooking on camera, except when I,
No.
yes. Okay, so the next one we're gonna do is a quickie. I love her. We all love her, Greek goddess. And I call it a green goddess because she's green. So,
Someone did ask,
yeah.
where do you buy your chili oil?
Ooh, great question. Oh, do I want to share where I get my chili oil from? No, no. My favorite place to get different kinds of chili oils is the Super Saver up on, they also call it SARS, that just opened up on Aurora. It's this amazing grocery store that has every kind of cultural food you could want. It has Hispanic foods, but it also has all kinds of different Asian foods. It has Eastern European foods, and you can kind of go and they've got a lot of choices and it's very affordable. It's right next to Oak Tree. I really, really love that place. They've got a ton of different options there. So, one sec. There we go. So, we're going to do a little shortcut. I'm not going to cut these herbs. I am going to, oh, thank you. I am going to use this guy. So, this is typically what we call an immersion blender. You add attachments to it. It seems like one of those weird things that people should not buy, like, oh, I'm never going to use that. Guarantee you will use this thing. This has a tiny blade on the end. Hopefully it's clean. Yes, it's clean. It's got a tiny blade on the end, and basically it can help you to smooth out sauces, smooth out soups, and you can get different attachments. And I'm telling you, I barely use this attachment, but this attachment, which is just basically a small container with a blade, so it's like a small food processor, has been my best friend. You can cut herbs with it, you can mix sauces in it, you can make vinaigrettes in it. It's just super, super useful if you cook at home, and it just cuts your prep time in half. So you're not like sitting there cutting everything. Okay, so let's see. I mean, I have it in my head, but I think we're just going to kind of go with it.
Also,
Yeah.
the real question, quick question on herbs, Anna.
Yeah.
Do you just rinse and dry parsley and mint before using it?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
skip those? Probably not.
I would rinse. It's always good to rinse everything. Sometimes like little bugs can get in there, some dirt. You're not if something is contaminated, you're kind of out of luck, but rinsing it off gets all those other like little particles and like sediment off of it. So you don't get like crunched into a piece of dirt. The easiest way that I've found is cold water. Really especially ice water will make the herbs very vibrant. And then you can lay them out on a paper towel and let them dry, or you can just use a paper towel and kind of like jostle them around a little bit. So this is a green onion. I cut off the ends. The great thing about green onions is actually if you cut the end off to about here. So if you cut here, you can actually put this in water and the green part will regrow. So you can use them over and over. It's a nice way to kind of like keep using things. And then the great thing about Green Goddess is it really is just whatever you want to add to it. So we've got our mint, I've got dill in here, which are these guys, one of my favorite herbs, and we've got parsley. And we're kind of just going to throw everything in here. It again, right, kind of cuts the prep time in half and it allows us to make our dip a little easier. So we're also going to throw in some green onions. I'm just going to cut them small so that they fit. And it's going to add like a really nice oniony sort of vibe to it. And we've got that. And then what we want to do is also we're going to add in some garlic. This is going to be, she's pungent, okay? So it's going to be a little bit of a strong dip, but we want to add some garlic. So I had peeled some garlic. If you see discoloration on garlic, take it off. These little spots are very, very bitter. And if you see that the garlic is sprouting, take the green part out of the garlic because that itself is also very bitter. Always take the top off because it doesn't really add anything to the flavor of a dish. And yeah, you can see I just kind of cut it as much as I can off because I don't want any of that brown stuff in my dip. You're not cooking this, right? So you wouldn't be able to really hide any imperfections. But this guy actually looks really good. So you just want to kind of cut it into smaller pieces. And then what we are going to do is we're going to put our attachment on it. I'm telling you guys, buy this thing. It is so good. All right. And you can see it really breaks it down. What I'm going to do is lemon juice, and then we're going to kind of let it start to create kind of this like slurry. Basically, it's like an herb, almost like a chimichurri. It's like a half chimichurri, which is, basically just a very fresh herb sauce. So again, right, using our hand to kind of limit this, the seeds going in. And any other questions?
Yes. So, there's a question about knives, or maybe we can revisit it.
Okay.
Or just we had a Japanese knife recommendation.
Yeah. So yeah, let me finish this and then we'll go for it. So we're just going to kind of get everything in there. We just want it to start really breaking down. And again, right, we want to make sure things are small. So they're starting to break down. What I'm going to do is start adding our ingredients to our Green Goddess. So we're going to do some Greek yogurt. And this is the great thing about this attachment. You can cut things up and you can mix in the same bowl, which when you are a single person, such as myself, cutting down on having to clean stuff up is fantastic. Then we're going to add some feta. It's going to add salt, which is why I haven't added any salt thus far. Cheese, especially fresh cheeses, are very, very salty. Feta is typically made out of sheep's milk or goat's milk. So you can kind of get whatever you enjoy. All right, so we got our feta. And then we're going to add, we're Americans, so why don't we just add some mayonnaise to it? Because that's really fun. So I'm just going to add a dollop. Not all mayonnaise is created equal. American mayonnaise is different from Japanese mayonnaise. Everybody is all into Kewpie right now. I agree with that. Kewpie is the superior mayonnaise. It uses more egg yolks, so it's much richer, and I think it has a better flavor, personally. But again, right, the great thing about cooking and food is it's all subjective. It's really what you like. So now we're just going to let it go. And I think, yeah, we can kind of let it go crazy. All right. All right. Look at that. There she is. She's living her best life. So, um, yeah, we're just gonna kind of mix it up. Again, this is where you can kind of customize it. How chunky do you want it? How smooth do you want it, And kind of take it from there. So obviously got to taste it.
So,
Yes.
uh,
Oh, Sebastian, you got it. Yeah. Everything else is really good. It's a little bit garlic forward. If I had chili flake, I would probably add that because I think adding chili flake would be a nice little spice. I don't want to add the sambal because it's pretty garlicky. And sambal is a garlic chili sauce, but we'll put it in here. And you can see this is basically, you could make it super creamy. I like my dips really chunky. And then we can like add a little bit of salt. Didn't measure at that time. You know what? That's how we roll. Kind of just do what we feel. So mix it up, see where we're at. Mm, perfect. Great. So that's really it. And then you would top it. Usually you want to top it with olive oil or something that's got a little bit of liquid to it, but we don't have that. So we're just gonna add some cheese. And that's that. And those are dips. So don't look at my cooking area. Any thoughts? Any questions? Anybody has some dips that they've been making that they're like dying to share?
one of the questions, was, um, could you use a plain non-dairy yogurt as a base instead of Greek yogurt?
Yes, absolutely. Um, You can use whatever non-dairy alternative. There are also lactose-free yogurts out there if lactose is your issue. If you're vegan, obviously you're not going to eat cow's milk, but there are some pretty great lactose-free yogurts out there. But you can definitely use a dairy alternative. I would probably stay away from coconut yogurt. It just has a very specific flavor, at least to me. If that's the vibe that you're going for, then go for it. I would probably choose more of a neutral yogurt. Like there are yogurts that are made out of almond milk or soy milk, which I think are a little bit more neutral and you can kind of jazz them up as you need to.
Next question is, do you have a favorite immersion blender brand? What is the one you're using in this demo?
KitchenAid.
KitchenAid?
Yes, we love her. She's been in our lives for many years, even when I was working in kitchens and KitchenAid. Most professional kitchens will use KitchenAid equipment. So I really like this one a lot.
And then, Anna, do dips keep well in the refrigerator or should you make them and serve them right away?
Oh, fantastic question. So it depends on the dip. Most dips will actually get better as they are allowed to sit. But remember, if you add ingredients that have a lot of liquid, they could have the potential of getting kind of watery, in which case you would want to just add something that's a little bit thicker. But I always think you want to make a dip at least a couple of hours before you serve it to allow the flavors to kind of meld together. Um, the green goddess dip, this one, it lasts for like 5 days. It's really, really good, and the flavor gets more and more complex. And then typically, what I'll like to do is like add lemon juice or acidity to it, um, or some more cheese or something like that to make it thicker. But yeah, it most dips will improve after a few hours, but the consistency will most likely change if you let it sit for longer.
Um, And Kelly, it looks like you have your hand up. If you wanted to ask your question, you're more than welcome to voice it if you'd like. Kelly did also mention that this has been terrific, like having a very skilled, non-judgmental neighbor to help my kids.
Yes, non-judgmental at all, right? Like that's the thing. I love when people get into arguments about food because that's the whole point, right? Like you have your opinion, I have my opinion. No one person is right. So it starts a great discourse, I think, which is something we kind of need right now.
Amazing. Well, it doesn't look like we have. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions. I just want to make sure to scan. I'm going to look to see if I missed any. Um, but it doesn't look like there were any that I missed. Well, oh, oh yes, no, we have Japanese knife.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there are a few brands there, but like Psycho, I think, makes knives that are pretty good. But honestly, the Masonos, these are really truly my favorite knives. This brand has been around for 800 years. They used to make like samurai swords. And so the steel, I've had these knives since I started culinary school when I was 21. And I just love how light they are. I love that, basically like they're so easy to handle. They're so like the tang goes all the way through the handle. They're just very strong, very reliable knives. And like my friend Mark, shout out to Mark, go to Spicewalla, that restaurant's great. He sharpens my knives for me, and he always says they're some of his favorite knives to sharpen because the blade is so well made. So, yeah,
How much do one of those rat worth?
a lot. They're expensive, but they're an investment, right? They're an investment in your health and they're an investment in your mental health too. So,
We never had to buy another one.
yes, exactly. I've had these guys for going on 20 years now. So, yeah.
There you go. I also love Spice Wallet. It's great.
Oh yeah, definitely Spice Swallow. We love Spice Swallow. So,
Is that are they the capital or the
so he does most of the training for all of the stores. Yeah, he's a fantastic chef. Yeah. So,
okay. Well, it looks like, let's see here. Everyone's just giving you kudos for all the knife lessons and all the, oh, uh, the knife brand one more time. I think yours.
huh?
The brand of the knife.
Oh, Misono. Misono. Yeah.
Great. Well, I believe that's all the questions. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining today's session. I will be sending the recording out. And thank you again, Anna, for spending your time with us and sharing all your expertise of knife skills and making these dips. So we might just have to eat these really soon. So thank you, everybody, again for joining. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Take care, everybody.